It's week 4 of fantasy football, and there's no better time than right now to crush your matchup this week, to beat your friend, to go 4-0. Maybe you're getting your first win of the season. That is okay too, because in this video, we are talking about 10 players who I think are going to go off this week. All these guys are going absolutely crazy. I feel really good about every single player on this list. Let's start with my bold call of the week. And it's been brutal, but it's Brian Thomas Jr. It's been really bad, you guys. It's been such a rough start to the year. If you spent a late round 1 pick, early second round pick to get Thomas, you are very frustrated. You are not okay. And Thomas has combined for 7 receptions, 125 yards, no touchdowns, and 25.4 fantasy points on the season. The drops, the lack of chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, stopping on his routes, not going up and getting the football aggressively. It's all been weird. It's all been very concerning. And yes, Lawrence has missed Thomas on some easy throws so far this season, but I've dug in, I've done the research, and I think that the biggest issue here is this wrist injury for Thomas. It's really bothering him more than what he's led on, more than what the coaching staff has led on. It's very evident that that's why he's scared to go up and get one of those 50-50 balls. That's why he doesn't look like that dog that he was his rookie year. He's still the same player. Liam Cohen described the nagging wrist injury as something that he's dealing with. It's nothing serious. And all week in practice for the Jaguars, they made a huge effort to get Thomas the football, to feed him the ball constantly. And I would think that if this wrist injury is bad, think Tyreek Hill last year, who ended up getting surgery once the season was over, if it was bad, don't you think the Jaguars would be more conservative with arguably their best player on offense? I don't think this is a confidence issue for Brian. I don't think he forgot how to play football or catch the football, or I don't think he has a major case of the yips, right, either, which gives me a lot of faith for Thomas moving forward if he can get past this wrist injury. Hopefully it is minor. Hopefully it's something that just goes away, because if it does, I think he's going to go crazy the rest of the year. This is a fun offense. This is a really good offense under Liam Cohen. They're only going to get more comfortable with the system as the weeks go on, and I think it could happen as early as week 4 against the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, the matchup on paper doesn't look great, but Jacksonville's going to be trailing likely in this game with Brock Purdy coming back for the 49ers, and with Travis Hunter looking more like a project than we thought he was going to be. He doesn't know how to run a full route tree yet in the NFL, in Liam Cohen's system. If you listen to Cohen this past week, Travis Hunter is going to play a lot of defense, I'll tell you that. And so I think that this offense, this passing game, is going to run through Thomas. He's going to see a ton of volume, and he's going to have a huge game that we've all been waiting for. I'm projecting 7 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. Do not bench BTJ this week. Do not do it. You got to ride out your studs, especially if he was an early pick in fantasy for you. I think he goes off in this one. It's going to be scary, but trust me, I think he has a big day. All right, next man up on this list, Ashton Jeanty, another guy that you spent a high draft pick on to get in fantasy, and he's been bad. Well, he hasn't been performing. It's not all his fault. Let's talk about it. RB34 in fantasy points per game, 47 carries for only 144 yards, 3.1 yards per carry. But all of this cannot be blamed on Jeanty. A lot of the problem is this Raiders offensive line, as Ashton is getting hit at the line or behind the line of scrimmage on 57% of his carries this year. It does sound like the Raiders are making an effort to improve this offensive line, to move guys around if needed. Let's hope it helps, because Jeanty has a smash matchup this week against the Chicago Bears, who have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to running backs this season, along with the most rushing yards. They have several key starters out on defense. Talking about the Bears, there's no reason that Ashton should not have a big game. And I'll say this is not the week to bench Jeanty in fantasy. While he hasn't looked like that special back that we saw in college, I do think he is going to be a good running back in this league. He hasn't had the best opportunities on a below average offense with a really bad offensive line. You have to think that Jeanty is going to continue to see a ton of work in this backfield. He's probably going to be more involved in the passing game as soon as this week, and he's sporting an impressive 26% missed tackle rate. I'm calling for the rookie to give us that breakout that we've all been waiting for and finish as a top 10 back in fantasy this week. So another guy, He's one of your studs. Don't get cute this early in the season. Play genty, feel really good about it, and he's going to go off. All right, next man up is Quentin Johnston. Let's go. QJ breakout season is here. Super awesome to see Johnston succeed and to ball out right now. He's the wide receiver 8 in fantasy, averaging 18.6 fantasy points per game, 14th in route win rate behind Puka Nacua and Rome Odunze. This is not a fluke. This hasn't been a fluke. He's the real deal. He is a lot better than a lot of people probably thought he was. And he's obviously proving a lot of people wrong this year. He has a higher separation score than Malik Neighbors on the year right now and is on pace for 79 catches, over 1,300 yards, and 17 touchdowns. Like, he has been unreal. He has topped 70 receiving yards and 14 fantasy points in every single game this season. It took a couple years for QJ to break out after a lot of people were calling him the worst receiver in all of football the last 2 years, but this is not a fluke. Like I said, he's going to continue to impress, and I think he stays hot in week 4 against a burnable Giants secondary that has allowed the second most fantasy points to receivers this season. Maybe with Jackson Dart under center for the Giants, maybe this is a higher scoring game. Maybe the Chargers have to throw more. Regardless, Johnson is a huge part of what the Chargers want to do through the air. Don't overcomplicate this one. Johnson is a really good football player. He's here to stay, and he needs to be locked into all your starting lineups in all formats. All right, next man up is Quinshon Judkins. This dude is going to be a superstar in the league. I can tell you that. And he's only played 2 games. Like, he had a breakout performance in his second NFL game where he played 58% of the snaps, 18 carries, 94 yards, found the end zone, 95% of the rush attempts. Forget about Jerome Ford. Forget about Dylan Sampson outside of pass down situations. This backfield is Judkins, and he had 87 yards after contact last week, 5.2 yards per carry, 16.5 fantasy points. And this was all against one of the best run defenses so far this year in all of football right now. In the Green Bay Packers, it didn't matter. And to put this performance, if you will, into perspective, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery in week 1 against the Packers, arguably the best running back tandem in the NFL, combined for 44 rush yards. So, like, Judkins is already a heck of a football player and is built like a Mack truck. He can handle the volume. He's hard to bring down at 5'11", 220, and is looking like one of the better rookies already this season. Good for him, and he currently ranks 6th in yards after contact per attempt, 9th in explosive run rate, 11th in missed tackles forced per attempt. Expect the Browns offense to revolve around Quinshon for the rest of the year. He's going to get fed the football in week 4, and it's not a great matchup, but neither was the Packer matchup. Neither was the matchup against the Packers. They get the Lions this week, who frustrated Derrick Henry, forced him to fumble again. He scored a touchdown, but didn't do much outside of that. So it is a tough matchup. You're starting Judkins regardless. I don't think it matters at this point. And the Lions have quietly allowed explosive runs at the 7th highest rate so far this season. So get Judkins in your flex. Get him in your RB1 spot. I think he has another strong performance this week. All right, next man up on this list is T. Higgins. Well, last week was rough. Losing Burrow has just been straight depressing. The vibes in Cincinnati are basement level. If you drafted Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, your mental health is not good. You are not okay. But I do think it gets better. Trust me, I have a lot of Chase Brown in a lot of my leagues. It has not been fun. But last week against the Minnesota Vikings was a brutal matchup. We know Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator, is a psycho, is one of the best to do it in terms of defensive coordinator. So it was just a brutal matchup all around, on top of it being Jake Browning's first start after losing Burrow. Like, it could not have went worse. But T. Higgins, like, he hasn't been great so far this year. 7 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown. I do think, though, there are better days ahead, and they could come as soon as Monday Night Football. There's nothing like a team getting embarrassed, getting absolutely crushed, and then coming out the next week and playing angry and playing motivated and just turning everything around. That's what I think we're going to see from the Bengals on Monday night. And T has been good with Browning in the past. In 2023, when they played 5 games together, they only really played 3 because Higgins was banged up the other 2. So in those 3 games, Higgins had at least 60 yards and scored 3 touchdowns. So Browning, T, they do have some chemistry. They played together before. This isn't a new quarterback. I do think Browning is a better quarterback than what we saw last year. He's played much better in his previous starts for Cincinnati. And we know the Bengals face off against the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. I would assume that Pat Surtain is going to be shadowing Jamar Chase, which is going to put T in a lot of nice spots in this game. I think Higgins has a big game, finds the end zone in week 4. He's another guy that give him one more shot. Don't put him on your bench yet. Unless you have like a clear, obvious, better option, I would be starting Higgins this week, and I do think he comes through for you. All right, moving on to our next guy, Breece Hall, who came out in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers and looked incredible. He was awesome. He was explosive. He had a really good game. And ever since then, he hasn't been great. RB26 on the year in fantasy points per game. He's averaging 15 touches, 78 total yards. Not terrible, but he has 15 combined fantasy points over the last 2 games. And Justin Fields missing the last 1.5 games or so with that concussion has not helped. The running lanes have just not been there. Breece does look like a better player than he did last year, so we'd like to see that. He's much more explosive as he ranks 3rd in explosive run rate right now, and he's still seeing the majority of the work out of this Jets backfield. He's involved in the passing game. He saw 6 targets last week. Hopefully that continues with Justin Fields re-entering the lineup, but week 4 is a get-right spot for Hall against a terrible Miami defense who's already allowed 6.1 yards per play and 23.3 PPR fantasy points per game to running back. So yeah, Hall hasn't been awesome, but you get Justin Fields back, which is going to help Breece, and the matchup is just too good to pass up. The Dolphins have also allowed the 8th most rushing yards this season, so Fields is back, more running lanes for Breece, super easy matchup. I'm expecting Hall to get back on track and go off in week 4. All right, next man up is Ricky Pearsall, another guy who is breaking out in front of our eyes. Slick Rick looks awesome. I wish I had more shares of Pearsall this year because he is going to have a monster season. Wide receiver 16 right now in fantasy points per game, 27% first read share, 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards at 281, 3rd in deep targets, and has gone over 100 receiving yards and scored 14 plus fantasy points in 2 out of his first 3 games. And balled out last week, 8 receptions, 117 yards, 11 targets, which was a career high, 19.7 fantasy points. And he did all of that with a banged up Mac Jones. Now he gets Brock Purdy back this week, which means I'm expecting Pearsall to go crazy yet again. And the matchup is beautiful against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to perimeter receivers. So yeah, if you have Ricky on your roster, you're starting him. You feel really confident about it. I think this game has sneaky shootout potential as well. We know no Nick Bosa for the 49ers on defense, so it should be interesting to see what happens with Purdy back. But it's essentially Ricky Pearsall and Christian McCaffrey in the passing game with no George Kittle. Juwan Jennings is looking like he's not going to play, and obviously no Brandon Ayuk. So fire up Pearsall again this week, and congrats because he's going to go off. Moving on to our next guy, Matthew Golden, the rookie receiver for the Green Bay Packers. The breakout, ladies and gentlemen, is coming. I think the breakout party is going to be on Sunday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys because Golden was already trending that way last week. His usage improved drastically as he was 2nd among Packer receivers in snaps, routes, and tied for the position lead in targets. 84% route participation, 83% of the team's air yards. And while that didn't translate to crazy production, he still had a nice day, 4 receptions, 52 yards, 4 targets, 10.1 fantasy points. We know this Packers offense struggled last week against the Cleveland Browns, but the Packers need Golden down their 2 top receivers in Christian Watson, Jaden Reed. I think that Matthew has a huge opportunity to really emerge as a star in this passing game. He's one of their most explosive players that they have on offense, and the Packers are going to have no issues scoring a lot of points on Sunday Night Football. And this Cowboys defense has a lot of problems. They cannot stop the deep ball right now as they have allowed 444 yards on passes, 20 plus yards in the air. Golden likes to go deep. He's a strong deep threat for the Packers. I think he has one of those 50, 60-yard touchdowns that he's been so close to hitting on the last couple of weeks. And Dallas is also allowing the most fantasy points per game receiving yards and touchdowns to receivers this season. So the upside for the first round rookie is sky high, and I think he's a really strong flex play. If you need to put him in your lineup, if you need a guy that could just go crazy, that could potentially win you your week, then look no further than Matthew Golden. All right, next man up on this list, it's Cam Skatty. I just like talking about Skatty because he is such a stud. He was literally the Giants' entire offense in week 3, leading the team in rushing yards, targets, receptions, and receiving yards, finishing with 10 carries for 60 yards, found the end zone on that really impressive run. He also had 6 receptions for 61 yards on 8 targets, 24.1 fantasy points. Obviously, Tyrone Tracy leaving the game with that shoulder injury helped Skatty really take over, because once he left, Cam was the Giants' workhorse as he saw a 70% snap share, 57% of the rush attempts, and led the team with a 27% target share, along with 66% route participation. And he also had 3 explosive runs of 10+ yards against the Chiefs and forced 7 missed tackles. This dude is so fun to watch, so hard to tackle. It doesn't really matter what defense he's going up against. At least it hasn't. The Scat Man also currently ranks 2nd in missed tackles forced per attempt and 4th in yards after contact per attempt. And while the matchup in week 4 against the LA Chargers doesn't get any easier, doesn't look great on paper, they are still allowing 4.6 yards per carry, the 7th highest explosive run rate, along with the highest missed tackle rate. That is music to Cam's ears because he's great at all those things. He's going to be the workhorse back yet again for the Giants, and this offense should be better with Jackson Dart under center, who is a threat to run the football, which could help out Cam in the running game. And I do hope that Jackson will check it down to Cam in the passing game, because we know how much receptions help in fantasy, how valuable they are in PPR leagues. I think Skatty is going to have another strong performance in week 4. If you drafted him, if you picked him up, if you traded for him, congrats, because he is in for a huge season. And our last guy on this list, Josh Jacobs, who has kind of been disappointing to start the year. Like, you spent a high pick on him. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been terrible. RB17 in fantasy right now, averaging 13.6 fantasy points per game, 3.1 yards per carry. Don't love that. And he also hasn't scored more than 15 fantasy points in any game this season. Now, to be fair, the first 3 games have been really tough for running the football against Detroit, Washington, and Cleveland. All of those 3 teams have really strong run defenses, but the usage has been there. It's going to continue to be there, as Jacobs is only one of 4 running backs to have seen 20+ opportunities in all 3 games this year. Green Bay has no one else in the running game outside of Jacobs, and if the Packers dominate the game like I think they're going to, they're going to be running out the clock probably the entire 4th quarter, which means a ton of Josh Jacobs. I think he goes over 100 yards in this one. I think he finds the end zone. I think he has a huge day. He's going to run wild on Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys defense, who is looking like one of the worst units in all of football this year. Jacobs is a smash start. If he's on your roster and you've been a little frustrated or a little concerned, he's going to ease your mind. In week 4, I think he goes off and has his best game of 2025. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Let's go win week 4. I really appreciate all of you guys tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.